have been in the midst of twin pandemics, as I've heard the term referred to, the pandemic of COVID and the devastation that has wrought around the world, and the twin pandemic of racism. How have United Methodist Women responded to both of those?
So the first thing that we know is that every emergency is the most devastating for the people who are the most marginalized. And certainly in the United States, our experience of COVID has really exposed wounds of racism that we perhaps were able to look past until this time. So like many organizations, we've been saying, how do we intensify our work? That it goes back a long time. As long ago as the Japanese internment, we see our predecessors speaking out. But I do want to mention that United Methodist Women's predecessors drafted and proposed the Charter for Racial Justice, which is now the church's charter, to General Conference in 1952. So the work is really long. But we've discovered that even though we have a lot of historical rootedness in an awareness of the work, that the way the visibility of racism in so many system after system after system in this pandemic has taken us to a new level. Of course, women responded across the country to the immediate needs, right? So it's the service and the advocacy working together. And we had a Giving Tuesday where we specifically lifted up the needs of the pandemic. Women responded generously, and we were able to support our national mission institutions who were providing masks and who were providing food for their neighborhoods and providing places to support remote learning where children didn't have access to internet or they didn't have an adult who was available to be present in the home when schools closed. We worked with the Navajo Nation through our board member, Darrell Jones-Joe, to send hundreds of masks and money for water and other needed supplies. So women across the country and around the world began responding to needs. We're engaged in pilot projects in Africa, which were almost immediately diverted into working on producing soap to allow hand washing. As well as masks for the communities where United Methodist Women are serving. So an immediate response to the needs. And not just the needs of your own family or your own place, but thinking about the persons who are marginalized. At the same time, on the bigger issues of racial justice, we very clearly see what we've talked about, how education is most at risk for Black and Brown people in this country, how the systems don't serve us equally well, how our healthcare system fails over and over again with persons of color to support and to provide trustworthy care for those people. So we've deepened our study. We have support available with works of our own and works of others that we're promoting. We've expanded the books in the reading program because of women's hunger to know more. And we have added a new layer of responsibility to our jurisdiction leadership teams, where they are engaging side by side with the Charter for Racial Justice teams to help our organization go deeper in thinking about how we can concretely respond to the systemic roots of the racism that goes so deep. And of course, we're engaged in conversations, not just in our own organization, but in the church, and in the communities where we are. So the work has been pretty wide-ranging, and we're committed. The jurisdiction leadership teams are quadrennial, so we're committed to carrying it on. It's not the work of 1 year. It's not the work of 6 months. It's ongoing work, and it's an invitation to us to take the next step in this important work that has been part of what we bring to the church and the world for so long.
In some ways, it's an extension of our discipleship and an extension of that going on to perfection, that grace at work in us, helping to transform us. As we think about the church and its future, in your opinion, what are the priorities that must guide what we stop doing, what we start doing, and what we continue doing in the next year?
So I think those are really critical questions. And I think for all organizations, when you think about that, you're thinking it's important to focus on identity. We do things not because they seem like good things to do, but because we are rooted and equipped to do them. So it's not, I think, it's not the work of Methodism to be another organization, but it's to say how is this history of grace, this history of convicting and converting love, and the history of engaging in action in the world displayed at this time. So first, who are we? We might say also, along with who are we, how do we tradition our movement? Right? So how do we really take on board who we are? We want to be open and welcoming to all, and we want to be uniquely ourselves, because that is what we bring to the world. So thinking about how to share that in ways that resonate with the issues of today and the contexts of today is part of the ongoing work. So the first thing is identity. The second thing is, what is the unique need of the world at this time? So a clear view of the needs in the locations of our local churches, but in the broader communities, the states, the regions, the nations where our churches are located. What's our call in view of the times today? And again, United Methodist Women have been working on in that way of thinking for a long time, to say, in the eras, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when very few women were holding political office, one of the things that we did in our leadership development track was to think about how more women could do that, and to equip people to think about roles for themselves on their community boards and school boards, and thinking about engaging in the public life. Well, we're at a different era in that. It's not that we have enough women or that all women see a way, but there are other groups now doing that work. And so that's not something that United Methodist Women is particularly carrying for this time. And I think the church needs to make those kinds of assessments as well. Where are community organizations, affiliated groups, other entities carrying this work? And where is the place where we are uniquely called to demonstrate this love and grace of God, and the belief that God is really calling us to wholeness, and to more bonds between us, not more lines between us, but more connections between us, which is what we see in if we look at the created order, we see that as God's methods of building and shaping the world.
And so I love this kind of concept of owning our identity and traditioning our identity. How do we actually live it out in the moment that is relevant? So take that idea and kind of share with us a little bit around what would we actually do differently to live into that idea of traditioning our identity in a way that would sustain vital, relevant, and effective ministry today. What do we need to do that's different than what we're already doing?
Yeah, I think one thing is to heighten our listening to where those themes are displayed in the church and in the world. So one of the things that I've said for a long time is that the liveliness of the church and the power of the movement shows up in hymnody. So rashes of new hymns and new expressions of who we are in Jesus Christ were so much a part of the movement at Wesley's time. It was so much a part of coming to new places. And I'm always looking, especially because of our mission history, I'm always looking for when in the journey of working with women around the world, songs in the vernacular mode start rising up. It's not just the songs that I bring with me, right? As from my tradition and my way of notating hymns and my music, but it's taken up by the local instrumentation and the local patterns and the speech of the people. So it's not just a question of translating, but it's a question of rooting in the receiving culture, and then giving fruit, right? So the fruit of the receiving culture then comes back and enlivens the whole. So one of the things that I think we have to do is to look for those, to look for the melodies and to look for the poems that carry this image, so that our traditioning is not, our traditioning is not so much catechesis. We have a lot to learn, and reading about the history of the church and the positions, the theologies that have evolved over time is always interesting to me. But it's the poetry and the sound and the liveliness of the movement that will deepen the traditioning. I often think of the hymns and the songs and the little bits of poetry that stick in your ear as little suitcases full of theology. And we carry them. Those are the things we carry with us, right? That they're what's portable. I look for the tradition, Methodist traditioning, as being rooted in Methodist ways of expressing grace and love. And it's why, frankly, I listen to new hymns and old hymns. The more I learn about the theology, I look at some of the songs that we've known for a long time and say, well, it's really clear that didn't come from a Wesleyan or Arminian theological perspective, right? We can learn from them, but as we really try to tradition, one of the things that we ought to be doing is looking for those kinds of portable means of theology that carry this image of love and grace and God's call and God's engagement with us as part of the movement of grace.